ask that you state your concerns for the record. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Trustee Dati.
I motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Attorney Dittman, I have a question for you.
Yes, of course.
Since we know that we're going to have the potential of making changes to the development agreement, we haven't looked at the development review. And so I'm curious if we pass this development review on second reading, but it's different than what we want to do in the agreement, it seems like we've created a conundrum. Unless we get really organized and know in the agreement what we want in the review.
I mean, I don't see where there would be a conflict. What would you perceive as potential? As I explain later, the development review is, does this comply with the code? Does the overall concept of this development comply with the requirements of the code? Where the development agreement is very more granular in terms of, here are the things that are required in terms of public improvements, and here's what the town's willing to require and not require.
So I think, Attorney Dittman, I think what you're saying is that there is nothing in the development agreement that is covered in the development review. Is that right?
Not that they're not covered, but there's no potential for conflict that I can think of. I mean, I would like to hear examples, I guess, of where the perception of conflict would be.
Well, I can't come up with them at the moment because I'm feeling like we kind of came up with a whole lot in executive session to look at the review to make sure that they're going to be the same.
So if there is a conflict, Attorney Dittman, what would be the process for resolving that?
Well, I think you could do an amendment potentially to both the development review. There's a process under the code for even when we're doing minor ones, doesn't require board review, or we could do amendment to development agreement to the extent necessary. But I can't think of any potential for conflict, but I'm open. If you think there is, we should certainly address it.
Looking through the.
I'm trying to look through. Well, why don't we just continue to proceed, and then if
And keep an eye out.
through it, let's all keep that in mind, I guess is my point.
Okay. And if we can resolve an issue by making amendments to either document, then we can do that.
Yep.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion on the agenda? Call for the vote.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, so ordinances and public hearings. Before we dive in, I think Attorney Dittman has some information he wants to share about process.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a short kind of overview for both the public and for the board's edification on what has been confusing to everyone probably so far is, what is this process? Where are we in this process, and what does each individual component mean in the context of the process as a whole? So I've made a short PowerPoint slide to kind of walk you through that. I think I found a way to make it bigger, and so hopefully we can all see it this time. Let me try to share my screen real quick. All right, can you see that better?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it took me a little to figure it out, but I think I've done it. So I wanted to just kind of walk through the development process in Lions, like step by step. And some of this we've already done, some of this we're doing tonight, some of this is for the future. And it's kind of show you for a major development like this, what that process looks like. And what you're going to see is it's a process that goes from looking at the largest, the highest level of the development down to a more granular level as we proceed through each step in the process. And so what we did, in this case first was the zoning. Does the project comply with the current zoning regulations of the property? So things like use and density and the intensity of use are regulated first. And so, in this case, there need to be some flexibility in the zoning to enable the project, but that's not always the case, right? If a project comes in, it's zoned commercial, There's nothing needs to be adjusted. It can proceed without going through that zoning process. That's where we started, right? And that was the kind of the highest level of regulations for the property, which is just use and the intensity of use. So in this case, density. And so at the last meeting, we did the PUD review, which really to set, how many units are there going to be? How dense is it going to be? What are the setbacks and some, kind of minor, some high level looks at things like parking, but really just the number of units and, how dense it's going to be is really, that stage of the process. So that's what we did last time. Tonight, in continuation from last time, we're moving kind of the next stage of the review, which is, understanding that it complies with the very high level zoning regulations. Does the overall plan for this project comply with all other aspects of the code? And so our Lyons Municipal Code gives you two different options here, whether it's a major development review, which is what we're doing, which is a public process involving a public hearing, or if it's a more limited project in nature, there's availability for a minor development review, which is administrative, in which the Board of Trustees is not involved in that process. And so, as you can see, we've moved from the very high level, use and intensity of use, down to a more granular level. Does the plan for this project comply with the code? Once we get past that, we'll go on the next stage, which we're also working on tonight, which is a development plan agreement, which is required whenever you have a major development. And what this is just a contract between the developer and the town. And it's cut off a little bit here, but the developer, through seeking a development agreement, is looking for vested rights, looking for a right to develop their property under the code as it exists at the time that application was sought. In exchange, the town gets guarantees for public improvements. And this is the area where the developer and the town can negotiate various concessions, which the town has the authority to do, in order to make the project feasible, or to in order to give the town to get additional benefit for a unique development. And so it's again, it's kind of stepping down more granular. Is it going to comply with the code? And then in development plan or agreement, it says this is how you're specifically going to apply the code, and here's what the town's willing to kind of be flexible on, and create a contractual obligation to do those things. The next is the building permit review, which is really just the administrative review, ensuring compliance with that development plan, that what you said you were going to do in the stage we're doing tonight, the major development review, you're actually doing, and then conformance with all applicable building codes. So when the actual drawings and everything comes in, and making sure they're complying with the building code. After that, we get even more granular, right? It's the thing's already built, and we're determining whether or not the building can be safely occupied and issue what we call a CO, a certificate of occupancy. We're ensuring that it's built in accordance with all building permits, and that basically everything is constructed to plan and can be accepted by the town. And so hopefully what I'm trying to show here is that there's a process that goes from kind of larger scale issues down to increasingly more granular, more detailed kind of analysis of compliance. And so where we're at tonight at this stage is development plan review, which is kind of, does the overall plan for this project comply with the bulk requirements of the code? And then as we proceed through each of the additional stages, it will get more and more focused in our review onto very more refined, more particular, more micro level of concerns. And so I realized that in order to zoom in, I had to cut off some text, but hopefully that gives both the board and the public a little bit better idea of what, partially due to naming, but what is a somewhat confusing process. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions for Attorney Dittman? Okay, very, very helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
So for resolution 2023-2, the major development review kit, where should we take this up now this evening?
So I would say that, at the last meeting, we had essentially continued this, and it was the board's direction at that time that we were going to not close the public hearing, but really reopen it and to allow for additional public comment to the extent that it existed. And so I think what would maybe make sense is have a very brief presentation, extremely brief since we've already done it, on what this is. If the applicant has anything additional to say, and then open up the public hearing to hear from them, short rebuttal, and then, the motion, the second, the discussion.
Okay, great. So, planner Kim, at a short presentation.
All right, yeah, thank you, Mayor Rogan. So, this shouldn't take any more than an hour. 317 Evans Street is currently a multifamily housing project or housing complex that the applicant is proposing to redevelop. There's now an approved PUDR for the property. That was approved a couple of board meetings ago or last board meeting. And tonight, what you're considering is the actual details of the development, all of which were in the packet. So your resolution for 2023-001 essentially encapsulates what has been presented. 00.
The major development review.
Major development review is 001.
Not according to this.
No.
No, it's
Oh, it's 2. My apology. Okay. .002. The major development review encapsulates the applicant's design ideas of how they will utilize the PUDR that was approved. It also incorporates the development agreement as it will be decided.
great.
Yeah. And what you will have to go through are the review criteria to approve resolution 2023-002. So section 16, 17, 30 of the Lions Municipal Code, the development review criteria of approval are many, and they don't need to be read again. They were read last time as well. There's some of them that pertain to some developments and not to all developments. In particular, one of note tonight is criteria number 5, the density and dimensions shown conform with this chapter, or the approved PUD requirements. That was essential to incorporate that as part of the PUD that was approved last week. You have sample motions of approval with conditions, or a sample negative motion. A final thing to contemplate is the PCDC in their resolution 2022-13 of December 12th incorporated 5 conditions. And those conditions, you can retain all of them or none of them, or modify those to your liking. And those conditions were also a part of the packet, that resolution from that time. I can share my screen if anybody would like to see those.
Attachment 14. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind doing that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, if you take a look at the big board, you will see Planning Community Development Commission PCDC Resolution 2022-13, and it goes through the kind of rote whereas clauses, but what's key here are the approved conditions that came with that, and these are the 5.
Mhm.
Zoom in on that. Yeah. Yeah. Bigger. There we go. Whoa, that's too big. All right. How's that?
Good.
And yeah, actually, I think we can see this maybe down just a skosh. Oh. There we go. Okay,
Okay, I think you can just, that's good.
there we
Thank
go.
you.
So the 5 conditions of the PCDC, that the remaining required information such as engineering consultant studies and floodplain application be submitted and accepted by staff as complete. One of my recommended conditions is that's tied in with the building permit, because those need to be into town so we can understand them before the issuance of the building permit. That the setbacks requested by the applicant be accepted, which that was already done. That parking accommodations meet the criteria for major development review, that was already accommodated. That the provisions for affordability described by the application be fully incorporated in the development agreement and continue to seek long-term solutions for long-term affordability with staff. That will be something to contemplate. And last, the very generic, these conditions can be edited for compliance with all federal, state, county, fire district, and municipal laws and regulations and for clarity.
Okay, so we're covered.
Correct.
Great. Okay,
And that concludes my presentation.
thank you. Any questions for staff? All right, then I will reopen the public hearing. Anybody in the public care to comment? No, we're coming.
So you're gonna take a second chance to.
No, this is it, my friend.
Okay, so just comment like a.
Come on up, and then you'll just state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. Microphone. Sorry to be so formal.
So, my name is Sean Allen. I live at 317 Evans. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with all the parts of the proposal, but I definitely am in support of it. And I think that for Alliance to support affordable housing would be great. There's always a lot of competition for finding anything that's affordable for blue collar people. And I feel like if I'm understanding the vision of the town correctly, that there's a desire for growth and for supporting growth, like with both of those proposed hotel. And I feel like if you want to help fuel that, then you would want to make accommodation for people that could be fuel for that engine. And so the kind of people that I think are going to help fuel that, be able to work there and build and be able to do all these things that we want to do to create, could be supported by these kind of proposals. I don't understand all the ins and outs of what y'all have to think about and not think about, as the case may be. But yeah, I just want to be clear that just from my perspective, that it would be great if the town could at least have an attitude of looking at how to support and be proactive and to do it in a responsible way. But I think overall it would actually be part of what wants to happen here. And I think that overall, like, if you're calibrated so that you're more able to support some of these bigger projects and attract individuals and organizations that can build some of these things that can help the town take some next steps. Because I feel like Alliance has kind of been at this point the last 10 years where it's like, it's kind of ready to take a step and then it kind of doesn't happen and it kind of ready to take a step. And you see it reflected in a lot of the businesses, that for businesses to really last year, it seems like that's kind of difficult because I've seen lots of different things come and go. So from my perspective, it'll be really encouraging to see that, to see that happen. So yeah, good luck to y'all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anyone else care to comment this evening? I don't see, do you see anyone?
There's no one online. I don't.
Okay, then I will close the public hearing. And sorry? Okay. I'll close the public hearing. Would the applicant like to make any statements before I ask for a motion?
Just about to turn off the microphone. I got
They
invited.
can go to your table. They can give that back to David.
Sure.
You can flip it. Okay.
Thank you. I can be very brief because I think you've heard most of this. And I'm Lee Williams. I live at 600 Indian Lookout Road with my partner Eve. We're also joined by our architect, Mullen. We have 317 Evans under contract that have not yet purchased it. I think you know most of the details and what we're contemplating for it. They tend to fall into several categories of topic. The first is architecture, and I think we've essentially covered that. That's, I think, mostly what this particular part of this evening is about, so I won't review that. I will go through benefits, economics, logistics, and calendar later this evening, because I think those are probably more pertinent to the development agreement than to the approval or modification of the development plan. So thank you for coming tonight. I know it's a busy night for a lot of people, for football fans and critics alike, and I appreciate your stepping in the second Board of Trustees special meeting on this topic.
Thank you. Okay. I would entertain a motion.
Yes.
We've covered all the conditions.
So I don't need to. Pursuant to Lions Municipal Code 16-17-20G, I move that the Board of Trustees approve this development review for 317 Evans Street, final PUD plan.
Thank you. Is there a second?
My second?
Thank you, Trustee Williams. A motion and a second. Discussion. Steph, did you have a?
No.
Okay. Any discussion?
So what did you say about 1-4?
We were hoping that you would carry forward the planning commission 1, 4, and 5.
I thought
Those are planning commission.
I thought we covered the planning commission conditions already in the amendments that we've made.
Have we, Attorney
I don't
Dittman?
think we've made any amendments at this point because we basically opened it up and then continued it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I had thought perhaps maybe the conditions of the PCDC could be conditions that you would add or modify or delete.
Okay.
And it's, yeah,
Okay.
so those 5 conditions, conditions 1, 4, and 5,
Would be the staff.
Yeah.
recommendation.
conditions 2 and 3 are already satisfied.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so there is a motion and a second. Would anybody like to make any amendments?
I gotta go find 1, 4, and 5. I have to see them.
Give us a moment.
I have them, unless you are ready to go. Well, why don't you do it?
Trustee Elson, would you like to make amendments?
Yes, I would. So I would like to make an amendment to this, that we approve the PCDC sections 1, 4, and 5. Be added to this.
Conditions 1, 4, and 5?
Conditions 1, 4, and 5, yes.
Okay, Attorney Dittman, is that satisfactory?
I think it's clear that what those are, I believe. So I think that's satisfactory. You can read them out if you want to, but that should be good enough.
Okay. Is there a second to the amendment?
I'll second.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem seconds. Any discussion on the amendment? Okay, we will vote on the amendment.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, everybody. Are there any additional amendments? Any discussion? No, I just want to say before the hour gets too late. Thank you to staff, to Planner Kivett, to Director Kaplan, to Administrator Simonson, to Dolores, to everybody who touched this project, to the board. This is a great example, I think, of what can happen when you look for ways to say yes versus reasons to say no. And so with that, I'm going to call for the vote.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Passed it. No, we have the final PUD. All right.
Okay.
So
Development plan, not PUD.
development plan, thank you. See?
Major
We
development
agree.
review.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to general business resolution 2023-003, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, approving a development agreement with Colorado Lookout Lyons LLC for property located at 317 Evans Street, Lyons, Colorado. Staff report, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Rogan. So the board has recently approved resolution 2023-002 as of a minute ago. And as a part of that, a development agreement is necessary. The development agreement was mentioned as one of the clauses of resolution 2023-002. And now the board will entertain the details of what a development agreement should contain. I'd like to share my screen if I could to show some of the examples to the public and to the board of the things to consider. Okay, let me zoom in again.
It's fine.
Right, there we go. We'll just scroll. We need to finalize the details of the development agreement. The development agreement is part of the packet, and some of the considerations that the board has to finalize are the following, and they're not limited to these, but these are some of the items. So water, sewer, and electrical connections, the water share cost, and the water share type. So the two types would be Colorado Big Thompson or Lake McIntosh. Water tap fees and number, wastewater connection fees, and wastewater connection numbers, that should say, electrical connection numbers. Development fees and determinations, so the land use application, so the costs for which are incorporated into overall into the building permit dynamic, but building permit fees, land use application fees, that would include my time, staff review time. Infrastructure related items, which would include things like landscaping in the right of way and sidewalk construction. And then plan related items. So the current resident displacement cost during construction and the cost of their housing, current residential rental rate structure. So residents who live at 317 Evans now and their return to the new 317 Evans, and then future resident rental rate structures. So that would be people who will live at 317 Evans, either new to the development or following someone who's a current resident leaving and the residence being occupied by a future new resident. When you think about this and all the portions of the development agreement, it's all under section 1617 or pursuant to section 161720G of the Lyons Municipal Code. And these are the items that have been hammered out by the applicant staff over time to get to a point where we are tonight. The development agreement, the board, I'll read the language of that 161720G. Submit and record a plan set and development agreement. Development agreement, number one, the Board of Trustees or town staff may require that the applicant execute a development agreement to guarantee the construction of on-site and off-site improvements as a condition of approval of the development review. Guarantees in the development agreement may be secured by an irrevocable letter of credit or by cash deposited in an escrow account in an amount determined appropriate by town staff. Development agreements shall be approved by resolution of the Board of Trustees. And that's the extent of what the LMC states. Following that are the various motions of approval that you make. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions from planner Kevin? No? Okay. So in order to discuss the development agreement, I believe we first need a motion and a second. Correct, Attorney Detman?
You're muted.
Sorry, hitting wrong buttons here tonight. So Yeah, I mean, yes, I think you also could ask the applicant questions or ask the applicant to give a presentation at this time if you so wish. This is a resolution, so it doesn't have the same formal requirements of a public hearing. But I think kind of given the nature of this, I know the board may have questions of the applicant might be a good time to do that prior to discussion.
Okay, thank you. So we're hoping this can be a little bit of a back and forth, if that's okay with you all. And so the development agreement that's in the packet is the development agreement according to town code, and there are likely going to be some changes made over the course of this evening. I think what the board is most concerned about, and what we hear that the town residents, the community are most concerned about, is the affordability factor. So that might be the meatiest issue that we have to discuss. So we thought we'd start there, because then everything else will be easy by comparison. So I know that you are saying 10 years of guaranteed affordability. It's actually more like 9 years once the project is built. I would like to see a longer guarantee of affordability. So, and I think my colleagues are in agreement with that. So what about doubling that?
I can't, I mean, would you like me to step in? I mean.
Yeah, yeah, let's make this just a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In November, we came to the board with a list of components that we thought could constitute the parameters of this project.
mhm,
We took it to the PCDC in October. We brought it to this board in November. It wasn't the proper moment for which to expect any kind of firm agreement. But from that moment on, we have tried to bring to the board, to bring to the town, to bring to the PCDC, to bring to residents and potential residents and neighbors our best effort for what we could do in economics, in architecture, in logistics, and all of the elements of this project, many of which have some impact on affordability. Trying to pull all of the levers to get the best imaginable balance. We didn't do what most people have to do in most circumstances, which is put a negotiating position on the table and expect a lot of back and forth and expect to meet somebody halfway. We put what we could do on the table. And I recognize that we couldn't have guessed everything that was important to everyone's priorities, every element that needed to be detailed in some way. So much of the last few months has been spent trying to find modest ways within that framework that we offered in November to come as close as we could to meeting people's preferences and expectations and balancing the different things where we could all push and pull a little bit and get something that really works for current residents, for future residents, for neighbors, for the community, but that also is manageable for us. I mean, we are not wealthy people who can donate the value of this property to the town, but we have enough time and we have enough flexibility that we can build something that doesn't make us money as long as it doesn't cost us a lot. And each time we try to figure out a little something, sometimes it costs a little more, sometimes it costs a little less, but we're really guided by where we walked in November. There are a couple of things that, especially taking to heart what this board asked of the staff at the end of the last meeting on the 3rd, that we've tried to do to improve that math, improve that benefit a little bit. One was, I'm sure you've heard or seen in the documents by now, rather than thinking that the 3 or so properties or three or so units that might be for new residents, assuming that there are 6 who go and then come back, that those 3, instead of being capped at 120% AMI, could be capped at 100. It doesn't cost a huge amount of money to do that. It costs a little bit. And it also feels symbolically important because 100 marks the midpoint of our neighbors here, right? If we're at 100 or below, what we're saying is this property is priced for people who are middle income community members. And if it was a little above, that's still pretty close to middle income, but we are willing and able to cover it. So that's a modest change in the numbers and a modest change in the symbolism of all of this. It's not as dramatic a change as going from 10 years to 11 or 10 years to 20, but it's something that we can manage. On 10 or 11 or 20 years, from that moment in November on, we've been modeling this for lenders and others and thinking about what it would take to make it all happen. And those were the parameters that we offered them. And here and there, for example, moving from 120 to 100, we actually had them model it at 100, just because they had to pick a number, and that was the midpoint between 80 and 120. So we can make that concession without throwing the financing of this property upside down. But if we were to change something like 10 years, that is pretty fixed in stone, that's been consistent from day one, that would require lots of other renegotiations that would be somewhere between difficult and impossible.
So thank you very much for that explanation. And you can't blame us for trying.
I cannot, I absolutely cannot. And I've tried too. I mean, I look at it myself. And when the PCDC said, work with staff to look at long-term affordability and see if there are levers to push and pull, I wanted to find an answer that would work. And if I had found one, you would have heard it by now.
So so let me ask a follow-on question, if I might. So I understand doubling the length of affordability would throw a wrench into your financing. Would adding a year or two throw a wrench into your financing?
Everything is locked in at 10. And there are other things that they might or might not be expecting in terms of a fee waiver or the definition that we pick of something. But the number 10 for 10 years is very prominently featured already in a lot of those documents.
Okay.
It's hard to move from 10 to 10.1. Now, honestly, we can change the definition of 10 years just slightly. So if it feels to you, for example, that from January 10 years, if people are actually likely to move in June or July, if that's 9.5 instead of 10, I can find a way to make it absolutely 10. I mean, we can say 10 from building permit or 10 from return. And that kind of flexibility, I can work into this, and I would.
Okay. So like 10 from certificate of occupancy, for example.
Sure, from maybe TCO, since some people may move in at that point. Not that there should be much delay between those two, but it's reasonable.
Right. Any other trustees want to add anything to the affordability conversation? Mayor Pro Tem?
I'm just still confused, and I could still use some clarification. What happens after 10 years to the residents that are there?
So if we're running this property, no one will see some cliff at 10 years. No one will notice things being operated differently at the 10-year mark. There are two things now that the development agreement contemplates being different in, say, year 11. One is the units that are no longer occupied by someone who was there in 2022 or there at building permit or however we determine them, would no longer have to be certified as being affordable for people making a certain income. So we would stop providing those annual comparisons to the town to certify it. But that doesn't mean that on that day we would plan to sell it, or on that day we would expect people's rents to jump. If anything, people would sort of see that day coming, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are some people at year 8 or 9 who want to protect themselves and ask themselves whether they should see some big change in 10 and they should prepare for it. We wouldn't expect that kind of a big change. I mean, without these requirements in place, we run our other properties as we believe they should be run. Our Allensburg property has no income requirements to it, and we've increased those rents by 3% in 2 years, by 1.7 something a year in a high inflation environment. And I wouldn't expect that to be any different between year 10 and year 11. We would have the relief from the compliance obligation of just certifying it, and we would have the latitude to increase to market rates. But as I think I tried to say once before, one of the things we're trying to do with this development is to limit the gap between the market and what we're actually charging. We tried to build something, or we are trying to build something which is kind of close to market, but filling a part of the market that the free market usually doesn't fill. People normally build luxury apartments. They don't build modest 1-bedroom apartments. But those 1-bedroom apartments, they're not that far off the market. And 100% AMI, not that far off the market. So it shouldn't be this earthquake that goes through the property in here.
Trustee Dashner?
I have a question regarding the honoring of pre-construction rents through the year end of 2023. So prior to this meeting, I was at a Housing and Human Services Commission meeting, for which I'm the liaison. One of the participants in that meeting, she's actually a tenant, and she was really concerned about her rent already being anticipated to increase this year. And I felt pretty confident that you had said, and here in the provisions too, it says pre-construction rates through the end of 2023. So what guarantees, like, do you know what they're paying now? And is there an agreement between you and the tenant as to what that rate will be through the end of the year?
So there isn't yet any agreement between us and the tenants because we don't own the property. And we've tried to respect the relationship of the current owner to her residence. However, I do know what every one of those tenants is paying. I have copies of all of the leases, got them as part of the contracting for the purchase of the property. And the rents that she had in place when she listed it in August are the same rents that are in place today. They haven't gone up from August to January, and they won't go up from January of 2023 at any point in the year. So exactly what those, say, 6 couples, families, individuals are paying is what they will continue to pay all the way through 2023. She'll pay exactly what she's been paying since at least August and maybe before.
And so I guess from a practical perspective, what does that look like then if we were to approve this tonight and you were able to close on the sale, would you then go ahead and create new leases with these tenants?
Yeah, we haven't really worked that out because we haven't sorted out what the likely arc is between the purchase, which could happen as early as Tuesday, and the ultimate resettling of all of these residents, so as many as possible of these residents after June or July. There are a couple of things that I think are likely. One is all but one are on month-to-month leases. The other is all of them but one have asked or are expecting us to give some assistance to them in relocation, temporary lodging, and then return to the property. We've begun to have conversations with other developers and property managers in town, and we think that we can put everybody into housing in at least Longmont, no further than Longmont, with maybe one exception for a 3-bedroom apartment. And that would require leases for that period. Just those happen to be affordable CHFA funded apartments that have very tight requirements for documentation. So what we would probably do is ask those same residents to sign a 6-month lease with us as the guarantor, so that if they have to walk away from it for some reason, we're on the hook, they're not. And so that we pay, they don't. If they just pay us their normal rent, we'll take care of everything else, including as much of the paperwork as the state housing authority will let us. And then when people come back on, they are not likely to come back on a month-to-month basis. They'll come back on with a real lease with exactly that same dollar amount in it. And we would expect that to be in June or July if all of this goes on the path that we're looking for.
So just to be clear here, so this 6-month lease during the construction phase, they would be paying the same rent that they're paying now?
Correct. They pay no more than what they're paying now. If we get them into some other apartment and it happens to be cheaper than what we're paying now, they pay less, but that seems unlikely. So if we get them into these other places and it costs more, we'll pick up that difference and we will pay for the move out and the move back. and physically help with the move back.
Okay, that's great. That'll be reassuring for her to know that. And she also had a concern around pets, which isn't part of this agreement.
No, that's part of the lease.
Right, but I'd
Agreement.
be curious. I'd just be curious to know whether they can move with their pets and move back with their pets.
Yeah, there are actually a lot of details that we haven't fixed in stone that I know are important to people. So one is pets, another is smoking. Another is the number of bedrooms, because the mix of bedrooms would be slightly different than what we have today. We'll do our best to accommodate people where we can. I know there's somebody, for example, who has a couple of dogs and a couple of bedrooms, and I think it's just one person. You know, we might see if we can reach some in between where that one person's not taking up a 3-bedroom apartment and filling it up with dogs.
Sure.
But I also understand, you know, pets are important to people, and you know, people aren't expected to stop smoking like that just because we happen to be managing the property differently. So we're trying to work it out. I can't make any promises on any of those except to be, you know, fair and humane and to honor the spirit of this, which is that we would like for the people who are there today to be able to return to the property at what they're paying today.
Any other comments about affordability or questions? And I can see you thinking.
Well, I'm thinking, though, I'm thinking it probably doesn't make a difference. And I know you said you kind of locked in for the duration of the 10 years. So would it make a difference if we could take concessions off other things, so the money changed? Would that play a big impact at all?
I mean, I appreciate that, and I'm happy to talk about, you know, give and take on some of the money terms. That 10-year mark is not really about the economics of it. It's more about promises that I've already made.
Okay, that's what I thought from your explanation. I just wanted to ask.
Mayor, you asked if there were more comments on affordability. Let me offer one more, if I might. When we were working with Attorney Dittman through staff to specify exactly how we would manage this question of only increasing rents as current expenses to run the property increased, which is the way that we always manage our properties, the way we expect to manage this, but not an easy thing to put into a development agreement, not an easy thing to codify. We offer one extra protection just to put on top of that, that is much clearer, much more definitive, and is more in line with what we're doing for the new residents at the 100. So as you may have heard, our suggestion is that when we try to memorialize this in the development agreement, instead of having this kind of subjective question of whether our expenses are justifying some 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever % increase in rental rates, instead that we cap the rental rates in the affordable range at 60% AMI, just as we're capping, that's for the current residents, just as we're capping for the new residents at 100% of AMI for the same 10-year period. It just seemed like a clearer way to answer that question when we had gone back and forth a couple of times in the draft of the development agreement, trying to find some alternative to.
That makes sense. Thank you. All right. Thank you for that explanation. So there are a number, there will be, I anticipate a number of amendments to the development agreement that's in the packet. And yeah, so we received your blue line there. Want to talk also about the sidewalk, if we can. So would you be amenable to installing a 4 by 150 foot sidewalk from the property to the corner of 3rd Street with an ADA ramp?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So it's 100 on the property and then 50 on the next property, including addressing that corner with any curb cuts or ramp where that's necessary.
Mhm.
Sure.
That's great. I know some people may call it a sidewalk to nowhere, but eventually it's all gonna get connected. It's kind of like the St. Vrain Trail extension.
It feels like a better solution than just the 100 feet with, green space on either side. And even what we've just described, unfortunately, addresses 2 of the 8 directions that people could enter that intersection from. But as you say, it's a start.
Yeah, that's great. And I know at the last meeting, we discussed the alley and paving the alley. The EAB has not had a chance to weigh in yet. They don't meet until January 18th. I know that before you left, Trustee Delman expressed to me that he does not want to see that alley paved. I can't recall what resolution we came to at the last meeting about that.
He can tell you,
Okay,
when you can tell you what the staff is recommending.
okay, what is staff recommending?
Staff is recommending, Mayor Rogan and members of the board, that the alley remain as it is, unimproved and not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and are you okay with that?
We are nearly okay with that. Our only asterisk to it is that if there are opportunities to just regrade it or to catch up on maintenance and to make sure that it can accommodate a trash truck or fire truck or the regular traffic of residents pulling into park, that we pay particular attention on day one to making sure that it's at the level that would be necessary. And I'm not a traffic engineer. I couldn't tell you what is necessary, but to just say, we'll do what we've always done may not get us off to the best start.
Okay, so, go ahead.
Yeah, staff is okay with that. We realize that the alley is in kind of subpar maintenance condition and needs some town assisted work.
Okay,
Yeah.
So we would agree to bring it up to a reasonable condition,
mhm,
at the time of construction, and then continue to maintain it as a public alley like the others that do have heavy equipment.
okay. Does that need to be in this development agreement?
So
It's your improvement, okay. Can we communicate that to the EAB so that they can consider it when they have their meeting?
sure.
I just want to make sure to have all the i's dotted and the t's crossed. Yeah. Okay, anybody else? Any questions about the red line that we have?
To follow up on your sidewalk. Though, do you feel that the language that is here? And this is what I'm looking at is Exhibit B, that the applicant has written and edited.
So
There's that amendment. In other words, do you feel like you have the appropriate language for the amendment?
I'll make an amendment, yeah, with that language.
Is it
So-
this language or?
I'll change it to 100. There we go, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I guess. Let's give people a chance to.
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
So because we've got 2 versions of this, should we stipulate what we think we should change?
We'll do that
We'll do
after
that
there's a motion and a second. We'll
Okay,
make amendments.
Okay,
Yep.
just check.
Go ahead.
I have a question regarding the ADA requirements. Is this because there's already a tenant who requires ADA access now, or is this because of the requirements?
No. It's because it was raised by a PCDC commissioner and we adopted it as a really solid practice. So there is a requirement in buildings that have, in developments that have a certain number of units, that at least one unit be accessible. So we would have been required to produce one ADA accessible unit. That seemed almost negligent after having just been asked about accessibility for one of the first times by the architect on the PCDC. So we instantly just said, why don't we make one entire building accessible? Because that's a natural sort of cutting point. You can take care of the access to that building with the ramp. You can design all of the porches to promote accessibility. But it actually is very hard to do that with a duplex. And it might have been hard to do that with both of the one bedroom buildings. So we instantly took that as a reasonable question and tried to come up with the most ambitious answer that we could, which is make 4 units and one full building entirely accessible.
So Matt McMahon, the architect on the project. The answer is it's required under the Fair Housing Act. So any building that has 4 units or more is covered under the Fair Housing Act. So all 4 of those units are required to be accessible, and they need an accessible path all the way through, including into the bedrooms, the kitchen, and the bathroom. So we chose to make that duplex or the fourplex all ADA accessible. So you see the van accessible space with the van accessible aisle and a ramp that leads up to that building. And so you need an accessible path literally from any public right of way. So it pleased me to hear that we are going all the way to the corner, which takes us to the public right of way. So hopefully that helps answer.
And here I thought it was my idea.
Yeah.
He let me think it was my idea.
So I have a question not related to this agreement, unless, do you have a question, trustee? You sure?
Just ready to make a motion.
Oh, okay. One more question, which is, what are you gonna do with the trailer? Because that thing's pretty cool. I mean, I haven't seen the inside.
I don't know. I was thinking about that some today. We don't have an answer. It won't stay on the property, unfortunately. One thing we had all talked about very briefly was whether that might be some kind of cool public thing that could be somewhere in that interstitial space between the property and the Dr. Bob property. But that feels too difficult, given the community's concern about that Dr. Bob property getting overused.
You might be asking for trouble there.
I think we would be.
Yeah.
So no, we don't have an answer, but we think it's cool too.
So you weren't considering using it as a guest suite?
It's not
Seems-
legal. So not legal.
We could make it the kennel. Oh, that's the best answer.
Office space by the hour. Yeah. Okay, I would entertain a motion. Trustee Williams,
Pursuant to Lyons Municipal Code 161720G, I move that the Board of Trustees approve this development agreement for 317 Evans Street, finding that the terms contained therein ensure obligations of the developer and the town of Lyons are mutually satisfied.
thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Ellison seconds. Okay. Discussion and or amendments. Who would like to start?
Would have an amendment to number 2, 2.1. To be amended to read agreement RE construction of project in PIRF. Developer agrees that if they cause the project to be constructed, they will construct the project and agreed upon PIRF in accordance with the MDR and CDs, subject to and in accordance with the terms and provisions of this agreement.
Is there a second? Second. Mr. Dati seconds. Is there any discussion? All right, we'll vote on that amendment.
The motion passes unanimously.
And Attorney Dittman, Administrator Simonson, Clerk Vasquez, if at any point we're veering off a path or you see anything that needs to
If
be
you'll
addressed.
just also use
speak
the
up.
item number that continue that's all.
Okay. I'm just saying, don't be shy.
Okay, we missed something.
All right, any other amendments?
I would have another amendment
Trustee Williams,
to 2.12, environmental sustainability, that it be changed to read. Sustainability developer will incorporate best practices and methods of construction wherever feasible in project construction.
and that was, I'm sorry, which number?
2.12. Oops.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay,
For your own.
it's okay. Okay, is there a second?
Actually, could I hear a repeat of that, please?
2.12, environmental sustainability, developer will incorporate best practices and methods of construction wherever feasible in project construction.
Is there a second? Any discussion? No? Okay, call for the vote.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, who's next?
I'll go.
Go ahead.
All right, I'd like to make a amendment to section 2.8 to the staging area.
Okay,
And let's see if I can get this moving correctly. You wanna, this one.
I didn't do that because I didn't have a wording
That's
for it.
fine. So this one we want to change, let's see. Developer requests use of the town-owned property more formally described as right of way in proximity to the intersection of Third Avenue and Park Street as well. We want to modify it. Right, to use, this is for the staging of the units. You want to use the road?
Well, I want the ability to use either or.
Correct,
If we could say based on, my recommendation or whatever.
based on Victoria's recommendation,
okay,
as needed
At the time, yeah.
at the time.
If we're past flood, height of flood, then maybe on the property, if not on the street, but either the lot, the 318 or the right of way adjacent.
Attorney Gittman, is that clear enough for an amendment?
So I'm gonna read it back, what I have, and let me know if this encapsulates what the Board of Trustees would like to see. So this whole first sentence would read, developer requests use of town-held property more formally described as the right-of-way or proxy. Sorry, I'm gonna restart this. I don't like the way I had it. Okay, so I'm gonna start over again. Developer requests the use of town-held property more formally described as the right-of-way at approximately the intersection of Third Avenue and Park Street, as well as the parcels held by the town at 318 Third Avenue and 299 Park Street, Town of Lyons, Colorado, for the purpose of temporary construction staging during the to be determined project construction window, as approved by the town administrator.
Is that, Trustee Ellison, is that what you meant?
It is.
Okay, is there a second?
A second. Pat.
Any discussion? Call for the vote on that amendment.
And the motion passes unanimously.
You?
And I would ask whether that the rest of that paragraph be amended to be reflect also the use of 318 and 299 Park Street.
Would you like the rest of the paragraph to reflect that?
Yes,
Okay.
I would.
Yeah, do we need another amendment to that, or is that?
No,
good?
I just wanted a clarification. So I think I can make that change.
Excellent. Great.
Like to suggest another amendment.
Please.
To 5.1A. The right to develop, plan, and engage in land uses within the property is described in the MDR, including the proposed construction of 9 residential units, a 2-car garage, 10 parking spaces, and setbacks of 9 feet in the north, 13 feet in the south, 4 feet on the east, and 4 feet on the west.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? No? Okay, call for the vote.
Motion passes unanimously.
Trustee Dottie.
Okay, I move to amend section 7.1, default by the developer. A default by developer shall exist if developer initiates physical construction of the project and then fails to construct the MDR and PRF in substantial compliance with the CDs and the other requirements of this agreement.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? Call for vote.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, there are some errata in the blue line that we'll be addressing when you see the development agreement.
I've already taken care of all the errata, so.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to those are the easy ones. No, that's it. No, we're good. That comes to us separately. Okay. Okay. So moving on to the exhibits, I would like to propose an amendment to the water section. So I would like to delete what's there and instead replace it with the developer will pay the $6,058.50 portion of the water tap fees that will be passed through to Longmont. The amount of these Longmont payments may increase if sprinklers are required and said.
You don't need that.
We don't?
No.
Okay. So we'll just leave it at, that will be passed through to Longmont.
Yeah.
The remainder of the water tap fees are hereby waived. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? We'll call for the vote.
Motion passes unanimously.
And you may want to clarify for the applicant about the ability of Lake Mac or cash in lieu will be.
Yeah,
handled.
so we handle that as a separate matter. There's a separate application and a separate process to talk about whether it's cash in lieu or like Mac shares. So that'll be upcoming very shortly. Okay. But I see no roadblocks or stumbling blocks.
We're on the right track.
Yep.
Good.
Okay. Anybody else care to make a motion? Yes, just Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, to wastewater, I move that the sewer connection fees are hereby waived.
I'll second that. Any discussion?
And the motion passes unanimously.
It's fun to waive fees. It's a joy for this project.
Thank you.
Okay,
I motion to make an amendment to the electric portion of exhibit B. The developer will pay the $4,500 fee for one additional electric service connection.
is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Motion passes unanimously.
And I'll make an amendment that to sidewalk, that developer will install a 4-foot by 150-foot sidewalk from the property to the corner of 3rd Street with an ADA ramp.
From the property to the corner of 3rd Street.
Yes. To the corner of 3rd and Evans, if I should be more specific.
That's fine, yeah.
Okay. Is there a second?
I second that.
Go
May
ahead. Yeah, you may.
Will we have the authority to actually install a sidewalk in the right of way in front of a neighbor's property?
Yes.
Or is that something we should fund the town doing?
If they're our right of way,
We'll
so
give
you
you
can do
permission.
it.
Okay,
It's a good question.
seems a little dodgy with the neighbor, but we'll do.
From a public perspective.
So staff will talk to the neighbor.
Yeah, it's just like any other sidewalk. We notify the owner that we plan to install it.
Okay, they'll see our truck in your direction.
Yeah.
All right.
Any discussion? Call for the vote. My phone stopped working.
So mine.
Oh, on.
Uh-oh.
It was on.
Is your on button your master one?
My master, oh, wait, there we go.
There we go.
I was accidentally hitting trustee Eddings button there.
And that motion passes.
Don't tell him. Okay. Who's next?
Like to amend Exhibit B landscaping
Mhm.
to read the developer will replace trees removed from the town's right of way in the northern boundary of the property is required by the Lyons Municipal Code. The developer will install ground cover in the town's right of way on the northern boundary of the property.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Motion passes unanimous.
Okay,
You know what?
go ahead,
So-
trustee.
For the building permit, I'd like to change this slightly. I'd like to have, because the building permit is, the way it's explained to me, it's 3 fees all incorporated into one.
It's separate.
It's the part, yes. So I'd like to only have them pay for the fee that's required for the permit, not the parks fee. And what's the third fee?
The planning review.
The planning review fee.
Well, that planning review is not part of the building permit. That's
Okay.
something we did
It's a-
do, and I wasn't sure you are doing part of the building permit fee.
Just the park fee.
Just eliminating the park fee, it's just those two.
So the,
It might be helpful if we could explain what the various parts of the building permit fee encapsulate.
Yeah.
Yes. Or is it, or
I think the only thing you want to.
I say, is it easier to just to eliminate the park fee? Yes, that's
Yeah.
probably the easiest. Sorry.
Okay, so do you want to, is that clear, Attorney Detman, or would you like trustee Elson to restate that?
They'll pay the park. they'll pay the
So we just want a
building permit.
separate new section called park fee and that the town agrees to eliminate the park fee. Is that probably the easiest way to accomplish that?
You could do
We could do that. We could do that. That's fine. Sure.
Okay.
Waive.
That was
It's on the
easier.
back of your sheets, you guys. You can-
Yeah, I'll do that one.
And you wanna wait, okay.
Okay, so is there a second to trustee Elson's
Second that.
amendment? Thank you. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, so the applicant will only be paying the actual building permit fees.
You'll pay all the building. permit
taxes that go to Boulder County, there are other taxes that go,
Okay.
there's about 8 different fees in there.
He would pay the building permit fee except for the park line item that comes to the town. Everything else we didn't have.
Does that answer your question? Okay. Call for the vote.
And that motion also passes unanimously.
To Exhibit B, I would like to add a category for parks fee. That states the parks fee is hereby waived.
I think, did we not?
He
just
wants
do
to
that?
have the categories.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Right. Call for the vote.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Just to be clear on the building permit motion, it should just read building permit, the developer will pay the building permit fee, period. And then separately, it says the parks fee, town agrees to waive the park fee. Is that how you
Yeah.
want it?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Done.
great, thank you.
And one more in Exhibit B.
Yes, trustee Williams, is
Under planning review, the planning review fee is hereby waived.
there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call for the vote. Oh, no, we did it again.
And that motion passes unanimously minus trustee. Ed.
Put some duct tape over that.
It's kind of close, yeah, it is close.
It's right
there.
next door, right next door. Okay. Yeah, no, exhibit, so exhibit D. I would like to make an amendment regarding affordability, and this is gonna be a long one, it's contained in the blue line. For 10 years from TCO. For residents temporarily displaced by the project to honor their pre-construction rates through year for, I think this is good, no, through year in 2023. And to cap their rents at 30 to 60% of the US Department of Housing and Urban Development area median income for Boulder County through year end 2032. for other residents to cap their rents at 30 to 100% of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development area median income for Boulder County through year-end 2032. Through year-end 2032, the developer will annually provide to the town a side-by-side comparison of actual rents, area median income, and permissible rents, certifying compliance with the foregoing provisions.
So the 10 years is only for the current residents.
The 10 years is only for the current residents. And this says through year-end 2032, got it, okay. Does that sound in line with what you all were thinking? Did I get that right?
So I have some feedback.
Thank you, yeah.
So I think the way it should read is, instead of saying through year-end 2032 at the end, it should say for 10 years from issuance of a TOC or CO, TCO or CO, whichever is issued sooner. This is not necessarily the case that a TCO will be issued. It could just go straight to a CO. And so
Okay,
I think, and they should both read, both A and B, and C should all read, for 10 years from the issuance of a TCO or CO, whichever is sooner.
okay,
If that would be my recommendation, if we're truly trying to do a 10-year obligation from the issuance of a TCO or CO.
okay. Are you amenable to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay,
And just a small detail in B, I heard to cap the rents at 30% to 100, but I think you meant to say 30% of 100%.
sorry, I did, thank you.
That
So,
was on A as well.
okay.
Thank you. Yeah, friendly amendment to my eyeglasses.
You also said rates under A instead of rents.
Thank you.
I think we got there.
I think we got there. I think it was all that executive session verbiage. Yeah.
I second that.
At the risk of making what Attorney Dittman would call a statement against interest, there's something I'd like to just highlight here so that nobody thinks later it got buried in all of this. In the earliest calculations of all of our AMIs and rents, we also included backing into a provision for utilities, which just makes these calculations very, very complicated. So to simplify what's in the agreement, we've taken out that utility allocation. And instead of trying to shoot for something which is affordable, including $100 of utilities, we just shoot for something that's affordable. But I didn't want to strike that from the conversation without just saying out loud that we did that to simplify this.
So just to clarify, utilities will be covered separately from the rent. Is that right?
Yes, people would
Will pay
typically
separately.
pay their utilities directly, not through
Okay.
us.
Okay.
And I'm only saying that there was a time when we were doing these calculations. There was a time when we were doing the calculations in such a way that what we were trying to say was we're making the rents affordable to the extent that somebody making, say, 60% of area median income could afford both rent and utility without being burdened by the combined cost of those two things. But it's hard to calculate that. We were doing it for our own purposes and we were doing that in early discussions, but it would take up a page of this development agreement.
Yeah.
So we just pulled that little piece out of it.
I appreciate the sentiment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a motion. I believe we have a second.
Me too, I second it.
Thank you. Okay, any further discussion? Yes, please.
Mayor Rogan, I'd like to direct the board to take a look at definitions. That's on page 3 of the agreement. And one definition that I neglected to include was what is considered a current resident. And because it's mentioned so often in the agreement, staff feels that that would be something good to define.
I think that would be a separate motion.
Yeah, that'll
Yeah.
be a different, so we'll get back to that
Okay.
in just a second.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no other conversation, I'll call for the vote.
And that motion passes unanimously.
You? Okay, let's get through, I think, one more here and then we'll talk about that. Is there,
Make a recommendation that we make an amendment on Exhibit T, number 2, to read, the developer agrees to bear all costs related to the relocation plan implementation, including but not limited to moving expenses, rent expenses during relocation above the resident's current 317 Evans Street rents.
there's a second?
And return expenses, are we not including and return expenses?
And return expenses, thank you.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem seconds. Any discussion?
I
Attorney
have
Gill?
I started, but didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to, before we get too far on the line, looking ahead, if we're going to implement a definition for current resident, then maybe it should read during relocation above the current residence 317 Evans Street rents, just incorporating what is going to be a definition here that sounds like pretty soon.
That's a good suggestion. Are you okay with that suggestion? You okay with that suggestion? Okay. All right, and I will call for the vote on that amendment.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Okay, so defining current residence, does staff have a suggestion?
Well, we're wondering what the applicant considers current resident. Maybe that's where we clarify. Is it upon closing? Or is it folks that have been there that recently have left? You know, is it who's there, you know, tonight?
It's a great question.
Because we're getting asked by other
Sure.
tenants too.
Yeah, we're asked to, and it's of course a fair question. Normally, I would say upon at the time of residents leaving the property to be relocated, but I think that's not, I think that would miss at least one resident that I know of and maybe a couple. So it could be upon closing, that seems reasonable.
Mhm.
I don't have any control over what happened before I took possession of the property, but I certainly have lots of leeway once we own it and having discussions with people. I can tell you, I'm on record already as having promised a person who early on said, I'd like to come back. I can take care of my own relocation for this. Is it okay if I leave and then come back? Will you let me come back? Absolutely. So I've already made that concession to an individual. And I absolutely will honor it, but otherwise I would say current resident should just be defined as opposing.
Okay,
And, you know, the development agreement doesn't have to include that definition of that person. We could stipulate that there is one resident who moved out in December with assurances of being treated as a current resident.
I think there's two,
There's one,
only one.
and I know we're, yeah, I mean, someone moved out before I ever had any conversations with the seller. Someone who, you know, we would all like to do something for, but who was there from March to August, and that's kind of a far look back.
yeah,
As opposed to the person who in December came to me and wanted to make a decision with some assurances from me that that decision wouldn't hurt her in the long run.
Mhm.
And I gave her that assurance.
Seems to me that that is between the developer and the former resident.
yeah,
That's not something that could be written into the.
No. no, I agree.
I consider that separately an enforceable promise.
Yeah,
So if we want to make this development agreement to capture these enforceable promises, maybe people as a closing. And I can do something separately for at least that one person.
And it's instead of closing, can we just say a date? So January 17, 2023. This makes it people will forget when closing is, and it's not referenced anywhere else in this document. So I think it'd be better to say a date.
It's referenced.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. We may actually move closing for one reason or another. So January 17th is a little bit of an arbitrary date. we could pick today,
Okay,
which would also be fine, as of the execution of the development agreement. Or, you know, I'm open to any of those answers.
Do you have a recommendation, Attorney Devon?
I think January 9, 2023, if that's acceptable, is just easy.
And the rest are between you guys and.
We'll work out what we can. No other promises other than one I have on record, but it's
Okay, so then I would like to make an amendment to add a definition for current residents. A current resident shall mean an individual residing at 317 Evans as of January 9th, 2023.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Is that acceptable?
Question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do we need to say that they're on the lease? That we know, today?
Yeah, can I say a current resident shall mean a person who is a resident of the property as of January 29, since that is a defined term?
But the question is, do they need to have a lease? Because there could be somebody living there right now who doesn't have a lease and. Or
Well, I
someone who
think
can't-
if someone's a resident, it doesn't mean they necessarily have a lease, it means they're living there.
Yeah,
But you said there's a lease for every unit right now.
Yeah, can we just say those people who are leasing units as of January?
yeah, sure. Sure. Okay, so current resident shall be defined as those people who are leasing residences at 317 Evans as of January 9th, 2023.
So a current resident shall mean a person who is leasing a unit of the property as of January 9, 2023.
Yeah,
You were the second, right, trustee Williams?
Yes.
is that acceptable, Attorney Tippin?
Yes, I think we may need to add what a future resident means, which would be the inverse, but I think that for this is fine.
Okay, great. So there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, call for the vote.
Motion passes unanimously.
Do you think we need to define future resident? I think that's pretty clear.
What? I think legal advice on it.
Yeah, Attorney Tippin?
I think mine as well, since we talk about current versus future for the avoidance of doubt. So I would just say a future resident shall mean a person who is not leasing a unit of the property as of January 9, 2023.
Anybody like to make that motion? Trustee Williams?
I move that a future resident be defined as anyone who is not occupying the properties of January 9, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just want to check with Attorney Tippman that occupying as opposed to not leasing is valid.
What do you mean by occupying versus, so someone who has a physical lease but is occupying the property, that's what you want to include?
Well, I just think in the current resident definition, we use the word leasing.
Yeah, so it should be,
So it
it should be
the
in
same
leasing.
verbiage.
Yes, so what I have is, and I'm trying to type and listen. So future resident shall mean a person who is not leasing a unit of the property as of January 9, 2023.
Yep, great.
You do what you mean.
Okay,
Yep, that's what I read.
all right, I'll call for the vote. Oh,
You did it again.
And the motion passes unanimously.
thank you. All right, any amendments that staff feels we should take a look at that we have not yet? Kristen?
You can
One say
say-
what?
No.
I think that one would
No.
not. No.
Okay, got it. All right, any amendments that the applicant feels like we may have missed here?
I would like to just scan through this quickly. The one that occurs to me is recital B. Developer expects to be the owner of the property, so that I'm not certifying that I will be
Yeah, I think
pledging to be.
that's covered under errata, isn't it? Attorney
Yeah, we already
Devlin?
made that connection.
Great, thank you. If you could give me 30 seconds to just flip through.
You betcha. You, if you'd like, we can take a short break while you do that. So I don't want to rush anybody.
In section 2.13,
We did. We accepted your changes.
done.
No,
Yes, you did.
unless we.
No, we-
Building official.
No, so we did not accept that one because that is not a power the town building official has.
Oh, 2.1.
1.
2.13.
Oh, 2.
Yeah, that's the one, yeah, we don't have the
Oh, I
power for
forget.
that.
The
Yeah.
the town
did
building
not
official
accept
doesn't have the authority to
Not
waive public improvements.
I'm good with any reasonable answer. It looks to me as if that's a security agreement that would normally be appropriate for amounts of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And since we're talking about $10,000 or maybe 20 between sidewalks and trees, to go through the process of setting up a letter of credit and doing other things. If there's any option of putting something in that allows us to do that in an efficient way that's appropriate to that scale, we'd appreciate it.
Didn't something else we read say if we could put
I think-
cash in an account?
Yeah, you could put an escrow.
Fine.
Would be an
Okay,
escrow.
as long as that exists somewhere in municipal code or in the contract. Okay.
Yeah, it's so under municipal code, you can either do a letter of credit or an escrow, and there's some other options, but those are the two big ones. So we could rewrite this to say there should be a letter of credit attached to your exhibit C, or other means of surety permissible by the town code, which shall be 115% of the engineer's estimate of cost. I mean, that might be a solution if you'd rather do an escrow than a letter of credit.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
And so I think I'd ask for a motion to that effect.
Do you mind to show they did not accept 213
So I will make a motion
or 7.2?
to the effect of the attorney's recommendation.
I like that. I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion there? In favor?
And the motion passes unanimously.
I was gonna be so impressed if you remember that.
Yeah, close to the one before.
We're good. Thank you.
Good. Any other staff amendment recommendations?
Water slide from the top of the highest.
Okay.
structure into the river.
I would like to make an amendment. No. Okay, if not, we have a motion and a second for resolution 2023-003, resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, approving a development agreement with Colorado Lookout Lyons LLC for property located at 317 Evans Street, Lyons, Colorado. There is no further comment. I will call for the vote.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Congratulations.
That was
all of
fun.
us. Yeah, a marathon, and we should have party.
And if I may I just add my thanks to Mayor Rogan's comments earlier, staff and a lot of people, Larry Kimmett especially, but several people in this room put an enormous amount of effort and expertise and creativity and goodwill into this project, and it absolutely could not happen without that investment. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Want to mention, this should become a case study of how to do.
I was saying earlier that this really should be a case study in how to do a public-private partnership for affordability.
In 90 days.
Couple more weeks.
Yeah, but I mean, really, I think this is bigger, this is big news. And I think it's a great example for other communities to follow. And I firmly believe that if we could do it with our skeleton crew and honestly fueled by dedication to creating affordability for our residents, then anybody can do it. especially those municipalities with more resources. They now have no excuse.
And let's not give them an excuse by failing to complete it. There still are some things that we'll have to do here. There are some obstacles still to be overcome. The calendar still operates against us. Trying to get engineers in the state of Colorado and lots of other things to happen in just a ridiculously short period of time, but we'll do everything we can to complete it.
Let us know how we can help.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one announcement.
Yes, go ahead.
You good? I'd like to give the board a quick update, regarding the avian influenza that is affecting the state of Colorado. The town has now probably met the threshold of considering that we are having an outbreak here. We have been in touch with Colorado Department of Public Wildlife, U.S. Department of Agriculture, CDPHE, CSU Extension. As you may or may not know, there is the largest outbreak in our history affecting Logan County, Morgan County, and Weld County. And we are in a migratory flight path of the birds that migrate, specifically the Canada goose. And so we have seen the threshold for calling an outbreak is 3 deaths of birds in a 2-week period. And we have had 5 in the last 3 days. So we are going to be doing a big public education campaign the rest of this week, encouraging people not to take their dogs around the pond area.
Oh, wow.
It can be transmissible by their feces. The birds, when they die, we are being told not to touch them unless you are trained, because you need to be in protective equipment and there's a special bagging technique and sealing it and all that. So we're going to have signs encouraging you not to take your dog there or to the big outfields at Bone Park where we know the geese are always at as well. Now, this will continue indefinitely. So, I mean, this could go spring, summer. So this is a pretty big deal for some of our dogs in our community, but nonetheless, it is transmissible to dogs and cats. There's very, very rare incidences of it to humans, but nonetheless possible. So I just want the board to know we're doing that. We'll be doing e-blast, a Facebook posting, a website update with all sorts of links. We also have quite a number of people in town that have chickens in their yards, and they are highly susceptible to this. So we just need to know that it's probably hit our area now, and that people are free to call it into the numbers that will be listed. We have watchers and reporters for the pond area. So people don't need to call us for that part. But if we do start noticing them elsewhere, we'd sure like to know. So we can report those to the right state people. But really not a lot anyone can do to control this. This is like, a bird pandemic. So our hope, knowing that we have other creatures of avian species around our ponds, we have a large turkey population, which is very susceptible. And also our raptors, owls, eagles, hawks will eat the dead birds and then they'll be infected. So this is not anything that any of us are wanting to deal with, but nonetheless, it's probably here. And just take precautions to help from spreading it further. And all of that will be listed out there, as well as symptoms to watch for the birds, your dogs, your cats, all those.
What are the chances of getting somebody out from CDPHE or CPW to do a Q&A at some point?
I bet that was possible. We could certainly request it. Right now, they are so
I
inundated.
bet they are.
They have said that between those 3 counties, over, what did I say, 6.4 million poultry have been killed in those 3 counties. That's why there's no eggs on the shelves, and there are no $8. That's
I was wondering about that.
but also the meat chicken, that's gonna. So that's why eggs are in such high, low supply right now. And it's I mean, they have to be very careful. They're saying also if you're hunting and you eat, duck and those things, they highly recommend you reconsider or cook extra high. But there's just things out there we need to educate ourselves on. So we'll be starting that campaign this week. Hopefully tomorrow you'll see the signs up in those areas. Private property, we won't be signing, but I think most of us, I know like the LDS church oftentimes has geese on it, the soccer field.
Yeah.
But if it's not ours, we won't be posting it.
I guess if we could have for residents to know if they find a bird on their property.
There'll
What
be
to do.
numbers to call.
Okay.
We're gonna try to do, in this case, QR code, so if people are walking and see that and they haven't heard of it, they can do it right there. But there's so much information right now at the CDC level, and then state level is, and now but there's a Boulder CSU extension that might be taking this. So,
Okay.
but just, just make you guys aware and if you see people with their dogs out where we know there's geese species, to maybe educate them too.
I know, sad news, sorry to. That's why I asked. what
We'll be
Longmont's
working,
doing.
Kim's gonna connect up with Longmont and Boulder and see if they already have materials that are easily printable. But what we'll do temporary signs this week, and then we'll order some more hardy signs moving forward.
Sadly, we're gonna need the horizon.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about the dog park? Does it feel pretty?
The dog park, we don't see them.
Never,
Birds don't hang out
almost
there.
never,
They fly over.
that they don't have to stop.
There's probably some feces there, but they don't stop.
I don't see droppings there either. I was just in with my friend's dog the other day.
But just so you're aware.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can we have a summary of action items, please?
I have two. I have
Please
where,
read back all those again.
Please read back all of
I have where to communicate to the EAB that the alley will remain as is and that the town will work to bring up to a reasonable condition. And also staff is to communicate with neighbors on the sidewalk. Those are the two following.
And the EAB stuff.
EAB.
Okay. All right, Attorney Dittman, anything on your end?
I already sent over the amended development agreement to Victoria and Dolores, so I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Is there a motion to adjourn? Oh,
May I also ask that we move the Macintosh approval process forward?
yeah, that'll be moving, that's moving forward.
Yeah,
Thank you.
already
Yeah.
said.
So what you'll work with.
I move that we adjourn.
All right, is there a second?
A second.
And that motion passes unanimously.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much. everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.